Across the United States and elsewhere around the world, people are concerned about what some consider a resurgence of bigotry, hatefulness, white nationalism, and white supremacy, discrimination. Today, it seems odd, but we are only 2 weeks and a day after a young woman named Heather Heyer was murdered and 19 other people were injured in Charlottesville, Virginia. I know it seems like a lot longer than that, but it's only been 2 weeks and a day. She was murdered on the 12th of August. Today is the 27th. According to my arithmetics, 27 minus 12 is 15. So we've only been 15 days, but it seems a lot longer, doesn't it? The evening before that tragedy, neo-Nazis and neo-Nazis and white sympathizers marched onto the campus of the University of Virginia, shouting racist and anti-Semitic slogans. They surrounded a chapel where people from many faith traditions and many ancestries were gathered for prayer and preparation to counter and protest against racism and discrimination the next day. Last Tuesday evening, President Trump boldly hinted he would issue a pardon for former Sheriff Joseph Arpaio of Arizona. Joseph Arpaio was convicted by a federal judge of criminal contempt for willfully disobeying a 2011 court order that required his agency to stop racially profiling Latinos. Just because somebody looks brown doesn't mean they're not documented. We can't assume someone's citizenship status based on how they look. However, Sheriff Arpaio didn't stop. And so a federal judge found him guilty of criminal contempt of court. And on Friday afternoon, while national attention was understandably focused on the threat of Hurricane Harvey, President Trump announced that Arpaio would be pardoned. So we have the pardon of someone who is the 21st century version of Bull Connor. You recall Bull Connor was that Birmingham, Alabama sheriff who had fire hoses turned on peaceful protesters and children. On Thursday evening of this past week, people gathered at the old Supreme Court room of the Arkansas State Capitol for a public meeting concerning the Little Rock School District, and there they found from Commissioner of Education Johnny Key and members of the State Board of Education that there are no plans presently, for any foreseeable return of local control of the Little Rock School District to the voters. The school district board was dissolved more than 2 years ago, January 28, 2015. So as the nation and the state gets ready to observe the 60th anniversary of Little Rock Central's desegregation, the largest public school district in the largest and most racially diverse city in Arkansas has been overtaken by a commissioner who is an unelected bureaucrat and a person with no experience in education at all, being run against the wishes of the majority population. Now, how does all that fit into what we just read from Exodus? I'm glad you asked. The passage that Deb Givens led us in reading today offers some helpful moral and ethical and theological insights for us about how God's people should respond to hatefulness, to bigotry, to discrimination, especially when that hatefulness is disguised as law and order. Understand, Joe Arpaio was branded as the law and order, the toughest, the law and order sheriff. President Trump supposedly pardoned him because he wanted to support his long career in law and order. As my brother-in-law mentioned in a Facebook post, that long career includes terrorizing Latino people for the last 2 decades. The book of Exodus begins with this interesting lesson about how an empire, Egypt, was led by a ruler and a regime who did not know their own history and who feared the Hebrew minority population. Sound familiar? That collective ignorance and fearfulness motivated that Egyptian ruler and regime to oppress and to enslave their minority workforce. When they couldn't work the Hebrews to death, then the Egyptian ruler and his regime ordered the death of all Hebrew male babies. We call that infanticide. And commanded that Hebrew midwives become murderers. How ironic. Midwives are the people who bring babies into life. And the ruler ordered the midwives to snuff life out of living babies. But according to the lesson, two midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, let's say it, Shiphrah and Puah. Because we don't talk about Shiphrah and Puah very much. Shiphrah and Puah. Have you heard a Bible school lesson about Shiphrah and Puah? Did you hear about Shiphrah and Puah in Vacation Bible School? No. Sunday school lesson about Shiphrah and Puah? Sermons about Shiphrah and Puah? What's up with hating on Shiphrah and Puah? Shiphrah and Puah engaged in a nonviolent and subversive protest campaign against that scheme. At Exodus 1:17 we read, "But the midwives feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live." Say, they let the children live. We're going to bring all the people into it. It says let the boys live, but you understand, when you snuff out the boys, you're trying to snuff out the future of the nation. One of the things I learned growing up in the country was, if you want to control the growth of a herd, you limit the number of bulls. So Pharaoh, the title of the Hebrew ruler, Pharaoh is not his given name. Pharaoh is a title. Pharaoh is the title of the ruler. Pharaoh ordered that the boys be killed. And when when Shiphrah and Puah were summoned before the king to give an account for letting the boys live, they claimed the Hebrew women are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. Now, you know, we call that a lie, right? Okay? Be careful that you do not condemn all lies. All lies are not equal. Shiphrah and Puah lied to save lives. Hello? Shiphrah and Puah disobeyed the law to save lives. Not all lawbreaking is not unlawful. All lawbreaking is not unlawful. It's possible to break the law and to do right. Hello? Shiphrah and Puah broke the law, didn't they? Come on now, read it. Wasn't the law for them to use their position to kill the babies? Shiphrah and Puah broke the law to save the babies. Be careful that you don't hate on all lawbreakers. Hello? Be careful you don't hate on all liars. I'm not saying you go out and start lying now. Don't get it twisted. Don't go out and say, preacher told me I got a license to lie. Preacher didn't tell you that. So what do we learn from this experience? One of the things we keep in mind is that when Shiphrah and Puah wouldn't go along, the Pharaoh doubled down. The Pharaoh ordered that all Hebrew baby boys, he issued an order to the whole nation, not just to the midwives, to the whole nation. All Hebrew baby boys are to be thrown into the Nile River. Now, what do you think is going to happen to them? In the Nile River, baby boy's going to drown, or the crocodile meat, right? Crocodile food or drown. First 10 verses of the second chapter of Exodus shows how one family defied that decree. We're going from two midwives to a family of lawbreakers. Husband and wife have a little baby boy. Kings ordered all baby boys be killed, right? Be thrown in the river. They don't do it. They keep the baby alive. The mother hides the baby for 3 months. When she can no longer hide the baby, she makes a basket, places him in it, and hides him among the river reeds, and then stations her daughter to watch out for him. After the Pharaoh's daughter discovered the boy in a basket, the sister volunteered to find a Hebrew nursemaid for him. Guess who she found? The boy's mother. It gets better. You got to read this story very carefully. Pharaoh's daughter knows the order, but she doesn't obey her daddy's command. She does not obey the royal decree to kill the baby. Instead, she paid the mother of a Hebrew boy to raise, to feed, to protect, to nourish a child her daddy had ordered killed. Law breaking going on in this thing, okay? This is your law and order sermon, all right? Instead of killing him, she keeps him. Instead of murdering him, she names him. The daughter of a tyrant bent on murder and infanticide becomes the protector and sponsor of a boy that she eventually named Moses because she drew him out of the water. Well, look at some lessons in this. One lesson that we learn from this is that ignorance and hate and fear, bigotry and greed work together. Work together, often disguised as law and order, to cause hateful results for immigrants and other marginalized people. And I love how this first chapter of Exodus begins. It begins with the people. There came a generation that did not know Joseph. The Egyptian Pharaoh, the ruler of the empire, and his entire regime did not know Joseph. You recall Joseph, Jacob's boy. You recall Joseph, the first of Jacob's youngest 2 sons. You recall Joseph, Abraham's great-grandson. You recall? Joseph. Why didn't they know that their nation had been faithfully served and saved by Joseph, the great-grandson of this immigrant named Abraham? Why didn't they know? Did the regime not know Joseph because the historians in Egypt didn't include Joseph's service as in the history of Egypt? You know, if you don't include stuff in the history, you get a chance to mistreat people. Just saying. Did the Pharaoh not know Joseph because the educators in Egypt didn't teach about Joseph and the contributions of Hebrews to Egyptian history? What we don't teach about, the people we don't teach about, are easy for us to oppress. If we don't teach about the role of women, we don't teach about the role of people, it's easy for us to mistreat those folks because we don't think they're important, because if they're important, we'd learn about them. Did the Egyptian regime not know Joseph because there were no statues to remind them about them? We got statues to remind us about some people. Fussing about taking some folks' statues down, but notice whose statues aren't up. Why isn't there a statue of Daisy Bates? We got folks wanting to keep up statues for Confederate generals, but there's not a statue in Arkansas of Daisy Bates. Why are there no statues that we can point to about Harriet Tubman or Helen Keller? How could anyone ascend to lead the entire government of Egypt and not know Joseph? Well, the second lesson in the passage is that ignorant and fearful and hateful people will rely on law and order claims to justify oppression. They said, we are afraid of these people because there are going to be too many of us. Now, first of all, they lied. How can there be more Hebrews, more Israelites than there were Egyptians in Egypt? Hello? Secondly, the Israelites didn't have an army, so they weren't going to overthrow them. But you understand, if you hate folks, you'll use fear as an excuse for being hateful. Instead of treating the Hebrew immigrants as their neighbors, they treated them as threats, a national security threat. And they said, in the name of national security, in the name of law and order, we got to kill these people. We got to kill the babies. The fear-mongering, the discrimination, the bigotry, the violence that we see against immigrants in Exodus, the first chapter, are in keeping with actions that have been taken against immigrants across human history. Strike through the name of the Pharaoh and insert the name of Adolf Hitler. Strike through the name of the Pharaoh and insert the name of Joe Arpaio. Strike through the name of the Pharaoh and insert the name of, yes, Donald Trump. Fear of being dominated and obsessed and an obsessive desire to dominate other people are the foundation rocks for every law and order claim that we've found in history. You recall, you got to have these segregation laws to protect law and order. A third passage, a third example, or a third lesson in this lesson is one that I don't think we pick up very quickly at all. Did you notice as you read through this passage that the heroes in this passage are all women? All of the heroes are sheroes. All of the heroes are sheroes. Look at the role of women in this passage. The midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, conducted the first nonviolent protest movement against tyranny we read in the Bible. Nonviolent, civil disobedience. They are the first. The mother and sister of Moses concealed him and guarded him. Pharaoh's daughter had compassion for him and financed his care. His mother nurtured him until he was old enough to be delivered to Pharaoh's daughter, who reared him as his son. All of the heroes are sheroes in this passage. In this lesson, women are not secondary characters. They are the people who are the pace setters. They paved the way for Moses. Without the courage and determination and the cleverness of Shiphrah and Puah, there would be no Moses. Had there been no determination and resourcefulness of his sister, there would have been no Moses. Without the deliberate decision of Pharaoh's daughter to defy her father's order to kill Hebrew boys, there would have been no Moses. Shiphrah and Puah protected Hebrew boys because they feared God. That's important to remember. Because they feared God, they engaged in social protest. Because they feared God, they did not obey the law. Because they feared God, they lied to the ruler. Because they feared God, they shielded Hebrew families from losing their sons. They misled ruling authorities because they feared God. So whenever you think of the Black Lives Matter movement, remember Shiphrah and Puah. Remember Shiphrah and Puah not only when you think about Harriet Tubman and Dorothy Day and Fannie Lou Hamer and Coretta Scott King. Remember Shiphrah and Puah when you think about Frederick Douglass and W.B. Du Bois and John Brown and Martin Luther King Jr. and Jeremiah Wright Jr. You understand, the Bible gives us lessons that women have been involved in the leadership, the prophetic leadership of liberation and justice and love in our lives. We just don't read the lessons. We don't talk about them. We don't tell our girls, hey, you can be a leader for justice. So remember Shiphrah and Puah when you think about other women who refuse to go along and get along, especially who refuse to go along and get along with ruthless men and their oppressive schemes. When preachers try to talk you out of following the unction of the Holy Spirit, remember Shiphrah and Puah. Acknowledge that you are competent enough to hear and understand God's will without having a man tell you that you can do it. Trust that the same God who inspired Shiphrah and Puah to confront and outthink an empire can and will inspire you to become an agent for love and justice and truth and peace and hope. And in the same way that the Egyptian empire and his regime did not know Joseph, many religious people today do not know Shiphrah and Puah. You understand? It's easy for us to say, wasn't it a shame they didn't know about Joseph? But we don't talk about Shiphrah and Puah. Preachers and other religious people who provide cover as tyrants oppress people based on bogus threats about national security and law and order don't talk about Shiphrah and Puah. Bible school teachers and counselors who say women and girls have to take second chair to boys and men don't talk about Shiphrah and Puah. But more than that, they don't fear God. You understand? Shiphrah and Puah lived the way they lived because they respected God. And when we don't affirm the strength and the courage of Shiphrah and Puah, we are deciding not to affirm the God who inspired Shiphrah and Puah. People who don't fear God, as Shiphrah and Puah did, will find it easy to go along with hateful schemes that discriminate against other folk. Folks who don't fear God will find it easy to mistreat some people because they're different. People who don't fear God will find it convenient to use, well, the law said it, as an excuse for going along with stuff they know would be hateful if it was done to them. Politicians and preachers who claim the right to lead based on being male not only disregard the claim of women in the Bible, they disregard God's influence in devout people that's shown in Scripture. Well, preachers, any good news? Yeah, there's good news. The good news is that God works in No, I know you're going to say mischievous ways. I know you're going to say mysterious ways. No. Glenn Jones used to say God works in mischievous ways. And I like that, but I want to go one step deeper. God works in subversive ways. That's what we see in this. God works in subversive ways. We live to obey the subversive God of Shiphrah and Puah. We live to obey the subversive God whose love inspired a Hebrew mother and daughter to break the law and protect a baby boy. We're the people of the subversive God who inspired a noble woman to defy her father. Hey, you know you're supposed to obey your parents, right? But the love of God inspired this woman to disobey her father and defy her father and defy the rules of her father's kingdom in order to save the life of a Hebrew boy. So in the name of that subversive God, do not be afraid to resist the tyrants of our time. Do not let people use law and order as an excuse to get you to go along with their oppression. Don't let folks use law and order as a reason for you to be hateful towards folks who are gay or lesbian or transgender or bisexual or otherwise queer. Don't let folks use law and order as an excuse for you to mistreat folks based on who their parents are or where they come from or what language they speak or how they pray or where they pray at all. In the name of that subversive God, Live for justice and liberation for all persons. In the name of that subversive God, stand up against every law, every ruler, every movement, and any threat and any force that's hateful, that's fear-mongering, that's ignorant. And understand, discrimination and bigotry always are based on ignorance. When people say girls can't do certain things, then they're ignorant. Hello? Girls can do whatever boys can do. They can think as well as boys can. They can lead as well as boys can. And whenever we tell any people that you can't do it because of, that's how it's always been, we are disobeying God. The good news is that not only God is subversive, God calls us to be subversive. God calls you and me to be subversive people. I know we're told to be good, but I have a new saying. Good behavior is overrated. I say that because understand, the people who were the prophetic folks in this passage did not engage in what we call good behavior, did they? They were lawbreakers. You do understand that if you supported integration in 1955, you were a lawbreaker in Arkansas. Because in Arkansas, segregation was the law. And so good behavior meant you were a segregator. Hello? We're called to be subversives. We're called to engage in bad behavior. So in the name of the God who calls you to be subversive, be a subversive for God. Be subversive because truth is always subversive to lies, and justice is always subversive to hate. Be subversive because meanness is always subversive to mercy, and mercy is always subversive to meanness. Be subversive in obedience to the God who called Shiphrah and Puah and who calls you and me to live for love every day.